But I would say in general, LSPs need to be optimistic about AI and the opportunities it's going to create in our industry to expand language access. LSPs should be getting out in front. They should be talking to their customers. They should be educating their customers, not just about the risks, and there are plenty of risks about AI, but about the benefits that AI could deliver. I come from a background of building technology companies, and I really love building small teams and building valuable technology solutions out of basically thin air, or just from a simple idea or a mission. I've done that throughout my career, and Boostlingo is no different in this case. In 2016, Boostlingo was founded by myself and my two fellow co-founders, Dieter Runge and Brian D'Agostino. Same sort of thing, right? In the early days of language industry, for me was 2016, but Dieter had actually been working in the language industry for over a decade. I actually met Dieter through a mutual friend, Sal, who was one of our early investors, and they approached me in 2015. I didn't know anything about the language industry. In fact, at that time, I probably couldn't tell you the difference between a translator and an interpreter. I didn't know. But the more I looked at the market with Dieter and Brian and looked at the opportunity in language interpreting specifically, I got pretty excited, right? We saw a lot of really large companies that have built multi-million-dollar businesses, especially in remote interpreting back in 2015. And these companies had built really amazing businesses, over some of them doing 100 million, 500 million in revenue. And we saw this huge total addressable market, which really excited me, because when you're thinking about starting a technology company, one of the most important precursors to pulling the trigger or green lighting that project is looking at the total addressable market. So that was a big opportunity we saw early on. And we saw that some of that tech, in our view, was a little outdated or antiquated in the market. So we felt strongly that we could build a better mousetrap. Of course, back in 2016, this is, back then, companies like Uber and Lyft were still kind of novel. They were still kind of cool. So this whole notion of a gig economy and on-demand services was still in its, I wouldn't say early stages, but maybe its sophomore year, if you're making the high school analogy, right? And we saw that, we thought at that time, maybe we could be the Uber or Lyft for language interpreting, except in this case, it wouldn't be drivers, it would be interpreters. Well, it turns out it's a lot more complicated than that in this industry. When you're trying to find an interpreter, not only do they have to speak the right language, of which we support hundreds now, right? But they have to have the right qualifications, right? So if you're getting a medical interpreter, they have to have medical training. And if you're getting a court interpreter, it turns out, well, they need to have court certifications in a lot of jurisdictions. So it was much more complicated than just building a car service. But the idea was, how can we help businesses get interpreters on demand to increase language access? And from our early days, our mission has always been, empowering our customers and the clients they serve to build technology solutions that will expand language access, that will break down language barriers. And I think, looking back now 9 years, I think we've been pretty successful at doing that, but we still have a long way to go. Boostlingo, we build technology solutions that, number one, help businesses communicate with their clients better. We also build technology that helps our partners, namely language service companies, manage and scale their interpreting business better through our interpretation management systems. But Boostlingo, if you take a step back, we have a lot of different products. We have many different products we sell, and they're designed for different types of customers that service different types of interpreting use cases. So that might be a multilingual event with remote simultaneous interpreting, where you have a speaker and it's sort of one direction, but you have listeners in 25 different languages and you need interpreters in a virtual booth in the background. Or it could be a use case of consecutive interpreting, which is very common, right? Where you have a doctor and a patient in a room and the interpreter is consecutively interpreting their conversation back and forth. facilitating that conversation. Our technology also empowers our language service companies and large healthcare institutions to manage their language workforce, namely language interpreters, not always. And that's very powerful because it's a whole workflow that we've built in that helps them do everything from manage their workforce to manage their client invoices to dispatching different resources to different jobs if it's on-site interpreting, to providing the delivery platform for remote interpreting, whether that's VRI, what we call VRI in this industry is video remote interpreting, or OPI, which is over the phone interpreting. So very powerful solutions that we offer across the board, but it all has one common denominator across all of the products we sell. Boostlingo helps break language barriers for our customers. We add extreme value to our customers in helping them improve efficiencies in their business and expand language access to the clients they serve. People would hypothesize during the pandemic, hey, will remote interpreting contract? Once the pandemic wanes or starts to dissipate, would a lot of the companies that had been forced into remote interpreting because they couldn't do on-site interpreting, would they revert back? Would they go back to providing on-site interpreting? And there's still a big place for on-site interpreting in specific use cases. In fact, our on-site interpreting continues to increase as well. But what we actually saw was the opposite. Once a lot of businesses realized that remote interpreting worked well, that you could get languages quickly. In fact, in some cases, you could get more languages than you could with on-site interpreting. We actually saw it continue to grow at over a 30% compounded annual growth rate, even after 2023, when some would say the pandemic was mostly in the rearview mirror. So remote interpreting services continue to grow. How people use remote interpreting services is continuing to evolve. We see more and more video interpreting versus audio interpreting, which makes sense, right? Because of the app revolution. As people download more apps, as it becomes easier with more bandwidth across the country, right? You've got Starlink out there. Almost anywhere you can get a really solid high broadband network connection. And that's just going to allow for more video interpreting, more remote interpreting. I think when we entered the market in 2016, a lot of the VRI, video remote interpreting, was done on specific form factors, right? A company would ship you a device and say, you got to run on our software, on our iPad, if you want to get the video interpreter. Now it's much more of a bring your own device environment, right? And the good thing about Boostlingo is we've always been device agnostic. We can provide our customers hardware if they want it, if that's more convenient for them. But what we find is a lot of customers want to use the devices they already are using, and we can work with all of those different platforms. So we see a lot of more interoperability in remote interpreting. And because of the internet becoming so, when we started in 2016, a lot of rural areas in the United States, for example, still didn't have good internet connection. That has changed. And so you're seeing a lot more video remote interpreting. I think it's the visual cues, giving that interpreter more context to the visual cues is going to help them with context. It's going to help them interpret better. All those nuances, not just in language, but in body language. That's where video interpreting really comes into play. So we're seeing a big increase in that, but overall, remote interpreting continues to grow rapidly. We see, there's no question about it, that AI is already having a huge impact on the language industry in general. And it has been for some time. People get excited about seeing Sam Altman on stage talking about their latest ChatGPT generation and doing a pre-scripted translation or interpretation session on stage. But AI and machine learning has been around for a while. And you look at translation, put language interpreting aside and just look at language translation. AI has already had a huge impact on the translation industry. In fact, the translator today can do 3 times as many words in a single day than they could 15 years ago. It's not just that AI is processing all those larger data sets faster. It's that the translators themselves are adopting technology, CAT tools, they call them, right? That these are tools that translators use to help them translate documents and do their job. Those CAT tools are incorporating AI features. So now the translators are using CAT tools for post-editing larger jobs, and a single translator that could maybe do 2,000 or 3,000 words in a day 15 years ago can now do 8,000 words. Think about that. But the demand hasn't slowed. There's more translation work to do today than ever before. Now you look at interpreting, you look at Boostlingo's world, and we're starting to see those trends emerge. Not in a lot of our core business, right? But you do see, I mentioned earlier sort of the remote simultaneous use case, these multilingual events where you have 20 languages you need. If you're going to staff each of those language channels with human interpreters, that can be an enormous expense. You're talking about a $200,000 event if you want to pull it off. Well, a lot of businesses can't afford that. So now they can use speech-to-speech technology to provide AI interpreting for some of those channels, which AI does a pretty good job, not as good as a human would, but does a pretty good job because it's one-way communication. The AI is doing that much more accurately than it was 4 or 5 years ago. So that the technology continues to improve. But it's not just the speech-to-speech technology. We can talk about, there's a lot of AI features I would love to talk more about that Boostlingo is working on, that our customers are asking for, that will not just help our customers, but they actually help the interpreters do their job better. When you think about like our on-demand product or our Boostlingo IMS product, right? So there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different angles when you think about AI and how it can impact our customers. And that's what matters most to me, is how can we build value for our customers? That's always front and center of our management team's focus. We don't want to just build AI features for the sake of building AI features. It's really important that we're out there talking to customers. And what are our customers telling us? Well, our customers are telling us, number one, we need meeting summaries. We need transcriptions so that it's less work for our doctors, our nurses, or our providers, because our system can actually then take that data and feed it into whatever system they're using. It might be their EMR, EHR, maybe it's a telehealth platform if you're talking about healthcare, right, and integrating into those systems. Or maybe it's captioning for ASL, right? There's millions of deaf and hard of hearing people in the US, but there's also just people that are not deaf of hard of hearing, but they've lost hearing. They don't know ASL. Captioning can be a huge value for them. So these are just some examples of some of the features we hear from our customers. Another one would be language detection. Imagine you're an ER doctor and a patient comes in on a gurney. You don't have any medical history or record of who this patient is. You have no idea what language they speak, but our app can auto-detect what language they're speaking, immediately rolling that call over to the right linguist. Whereas before, it might have taken them 10, 15, 20 minutes just to even determine what language that person speaks. So these are very powerful features that AI is not replacing human interpreters. It's facilitating the human interpreting session. And a lot of our focus has been on that. Think about our IMS product, our interpretation management system that a lot of our language service providers use today, right? Think about how AI can help them. So integrating AI into auto broadcasting features, where the AI is able to make a decision. Imagine you have this interpreting job, right? They need an Arabic interpreter next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Well, right now, the LSP admin has to go in and figure out who's the best resource for that job, who's going to be able to, who has the right knowledge, who's close by to that, wherever that facility is. Imagine if you had AI looking at 3 different interpreters that are in the region, and one's 3 miles away and looks like a great fit, but there's another interpreter that's 6 miles away that's worked with that customer before, that has previous experience, and the customer's given that interpreter really high reviews. The AI is able to make a decision based on all these parameters that you've set, all these rules you've set, to choose that interpreter. So that's just one example of where a human doesn't have to get involved. AI is automating. AI is making that decision for you. So when we think about those workflows, there's a lot of powerful things we can build in our IMS platform. That's just one example, but more predictive insights into reporting. I think it's going to allow our LSPs to do a lot more with less, which is critical for them to remain competitive in this very hard environment to remain competitive and keep your gross margins high. So that's another example in our IMS. So it's not just our on-demand platform. We're thinking about all of our products and where we can value add with AI. There's a lot of different thoughts in the industry. Some I would say more optimistic, others more pessimistic about AI's impact on our industry. What I would tell the LSPs is, and I guess it depends, number one, what industries the LSPs work with, what type of customers the LSP works with, and what types of interpreting services do they offer to begin with. Maybe some of those LSPs you're asking about still don't provide remote interpreting services. So that's going to change how they talk to their customers about AI. But I would say in general, LSPs need to be optimistic about AI and the opportunities it's going to create in our industry to expand language access. LSPs should be getting out in front. They should be talking to their customers. They should be educating their customers, not just about the risks, and there are plenty of risks about AI, but about the benefits that AI could deliver, right? You don't want to introduce speech-to-speech technology into a highly complex, a high-risk type of conversation. You don't want to be introducing speech-to-speech AI technology in regulated industries in general, right? But a lot of our LSPs work with businesses that don't have, maybe they're less complex conversations, they're short form, and they've been using human interpreters and they can't afford it anymore. Well, AI could provide an opportunity for that customer to expand language access at a fraction of the cost. So they need to be able to understand that decision tree with their customers and when to recommend AI and when not to recommend AI. But even in regulated industries, when you talk about healthcare and you talk about court systems, right? AI is going to play a role. It may not be speech to speech. The human is still front and center doing the interpretation, and I think for a long time. But I do think that AI could play a role doing the things that we already talked about. Some of those features like language recognition, language detection. I think the annotating meeting summaries, and I think a lot of LSP customers are going to demand that they integrate with the systems that they use, whether that's their electronic healthcare record system or it's their telehealth system. I think the technology platforms that will win the day are the ones that integrate into their customers' workflows. So, but if I'm an LSP in general, I'm optimistic today. There are risks and there are things to be concerned about with AI. You cannot deploy it recklessly, but it's going to, I'm absolutely convinced, expand the market and provide more language access than we've ever seen.